Okay, let's take a look at the analysis. And a lot of people have been away, so we're going to take a look at the one that we worked through. Half of your assessment, or half of your poster, will be about comparing box plots and their statistics, and having a conversation about what you see in your sample. So this is blood pressure sampling, and we've taken a sample of male and female blood pressures in this British study. And so at the very beginning you will have a little bit of a blurb about what you're doing and what you're studying and how the sample was taken, if you know that information. And then we need to design a comparative question. I wonder if there will be a difference in the systolic blood pressure medians between males and females from the British study. So we have to include the variable, which is the difference between the medians. We have to include the groups that we're comparing, which is the females and the males. And we have to talk about, in a comparison way, we want to know if there's a difference between these two groups, and we need to name the population. In this case, it's a British study. It's not the British people in general, it's a British study, and so this was a sample taken from a fairly substantial British study. And then a bit of a plan about what you're going to be doing. The sampling method used is not random because these people were self-selected and so on, and we talk about that. But really what I want to get down to is how we do the analysis around the sample. Again, keep this in mind, that this is a sample that we're talking about that is going to help us make inferences back to what's going on in the population. And the population is the people in the British study. What is it showing us? Is there a difference between the male and female blood pressures, their median blood pressures? So we first look at shift and center. So we talk about the medians, what they are. So the median, the sample of the males is 105.9, the median of the females is 104.8, and what the difference between those is. The difference between the median's blood pressure is 1.1, and you use mmHgs, which is the unit for blood pressure. So there's very little difference between these two. There's a 1.1 difference. The median male from the sample was shifted to the right, so you can see that it's a little bit higher up the scale, obviously. Compared to the females, there's not much shift, which would mean that back in the population there's little difference between. There doesn't seem to be a lot of difference based on these medians and where they are in relation to each other. Then you talk about the shifts in the boxes compared to each other. So and we don't talk about boxes, we talk about the middle 50%. So the middle 50% is shifted further to the right. Not a lot, because there's a lot of overlap between these, which is what you're going to talk about as well. But there's a little bit of a shift to the right, slightly right the scale than the females' middle 50%. This is not much shift in the middle 50% of the males comparison to the females, which would mean that there's not much difference because there's a lot of overlap, and they haven't included any evidence. So the stuff in red is something that you have to include in your write-up. It's evidence around the fact that one is shifted further to the right. So the lower quartile of males is slightly higher. So the lower quartile of the males is slightly higher than the lower quartile of the females at 102.6, so I actually use a number, and it finishes at 110. So I get this from here. The lower quartile of the males, 102.6 and 110.3. So, and that is in comparison to the 109.7. So that shows me there's some evidence around that shift.